Everybody, and welcome to our show today. I'm really glad everybody could join us today. Let me turn my volume a little here. Today is a really cool live webinar. We've never done anything like this before because I've really brought on one of our special partners that's going to go through and talk a lot about kind of the state of business lending here in 2017. We're going to talk about where we've been over the last 5-10 years and kind of how that's developed into where we are now and how technology has really helped make it more easy than ever for you to be able to get funding and get approved. What I like about this best is we're going to give you a link maybe in the middle of the webinar, definitely at the end, to be able to go in and get approved for what I personally have found to be the easiest credit line that exists to get approved for if you meet some criteria, which I'm sure we'll talk about during the actual webinar. So with us today is Greg Powell. Now, Greg, I'm not sure of your position at Funbox. You're going to have to chime in and tell me. But Greg's a powerhouse at Fundbox, one of our preferred lenders that is really changing the landscaping of business funding. They found one of the easiest ways to get approved for business loans that aren't really tied to your FICO. We're kind of pushing the FICO score out of the equation, and they found a great way to be able to get approved without the credit check that's required with so many other lending sources out there today, and I'm excited to jump in. So without a further delay, Greg, welcome, man. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much. And I'm head of product and brand marketing at Fundbox.
Boom! I appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you want me to jump right in?
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to get going.
Okay, fantastic. So, I titled my discussion today, my webinar today, "The Evolution of Small Business Credit and Why You Should Care," because as Ty alluded, there have been, over the past few years, some meaningful changes that really benefit small businesses. And so I'm going to walk you through what some of those are and how our good friends at Credit Suite are very close partners with us in taking advantage of some of those trends as well. So first, head of product and brand marketing at Funbox. I've developed a very strong passion and empathy for small businesses, starting with my time at Intuit in a variety of different marketing roles at Intuit, where I worked on the QuickBooks business. Prior to that, I was a brand manager at Clorox, and you can reach me with any questions if you have them at greg.powell@funbox.com. So small businesses are a huge market, and a lot of small businesses have cash flow gaps. We'll describe what those are in just a second. But small businesses are a huge part of the U.S. economy. So any small business owners out there should feel a sense of pride over what you're delivering to the U.S. economy. Almost 50% of all private sector employment is with small businesses, and almost 98% of all U.S. businesses are small businesses as well. This has huge implications. Small businesses are one of the major engines for our entire economy. But that's not without. But small businesses aren't without some problems, despite the fact that there are many of them, and despite the fact they employ a lot of people. Small businesses often face major cash flow gaps, which can be a real problem for the U.S. economy. At Funbox, we looked at our data and calculated that at any given time, the small businesses across the U.S. have about $825 billion in unpaid invoices. Right? And this creates huge problems for small businesses because while they're waiting on payment, they still have to pay expenses like their rent or make payroll. And this is at any given time, small businesses have about $84,000 in unpaid invoices each. This translates to about 5% of the U.S. GDP. So it's a problem that not only are we aware of, but at Funbox, and I'm sure the folks at Credit Suite are as well, but it's a problem that we should all be aware of in the U.S. So why are these cash flow gaps so common? Well, they're common in part because of the way that credit is distributed to small businesses. So we'll start by looking at the banks, which have long been the most popular option for small businesses to secure funding. So how do the banks make credit decisions for small businesses? Well, they start with a person, a manual underwriter. An underwriter is just a fancy word for someone who decides who's going to and who is not going to get credit from the bank or funding from the bank. The manual underwriter, just as it sounds, does everything by hand, or a lot of things by hand. Of course, they use a computer, but they are manually reviewing all of the applications that come their way. And so it takes about the same amount of time for this manual underwriter to review an application for, say, $10,000 as it does for $1 million. The bank's goal is to minimize risk. And one of the most convenient and popular ways for them to do this is to look at your personal credit score. And Ty mentioned earlier FICO. FICO is just an acronym that means personal credit, essentially. They also want a personal guarantee. And they want to look at your cash balance. And we always think that this is a little bit problematic because a lot of small businesses come to banks in the first place to get cash, to solve a cash flow problem. They are cash poor. They might have a very healthy business, but they are cash poor, which is why they came to the bank in the first place. And so having a really healthy cash balance, for a lot of small businesses, especially those that are growing, is unlikely. It's been like this for about 50 years, ever since FICO was created about 50 years ago, because FICO has just become the industry standard. And it not only applies to, say, a term loan, a big lump sum that you might apply for from a bank, or a line of credit from a bank, but also most business credit cards as well. So, because business credit cards are, after all, tied back to a bank. And so this is kind of the standard in terms of small business financing. 2008, many of you remember, the economy suffered greatly. The recession started in 2008 when the real estate housing market collapsed. And a lot of banks lost a lot of money from bad investments, and all credit froze. So this created a perfect storm for small businesses because the federal government got involved and they passed the Dodd-Frank bill, which required banks to hold higher reserves to lower their risk of insolvency. So some of you may remember that part of the whole problem was that the banks were lending out so much money and making these risky bets with the cash that they had on hand, and they were only holding a little bit in reserves. And of course, those reserves weren't high enough to cover all the losses that they experienced when their investments fell through. So this had a negative impact on small business owners because the banks, all of a sudden, they were approving a bunch of small businesses for loans, and all of a sudden they started only approving about 13% of small business loan applications a few years after the recession started, which is where we collected our data, 2011 to 2013. I believe it was even lower as we inch backwards closer to 2008. That has climbed up to about 25% at our latest calculation this year. But still, that's 75%, or 3 out of 4 small businesses who are getting rejected by banks every time they apply for a loan, by large banks. So the problem is that these higher reserves instituted by the Dodd-Frank bill meant that the banks could no longer profitably lend to a small business asking for less than about $100,000. They had to hold higher reserves, so they wanted to lend out their money to the highest margin loans that they could make, which of course were the larger loans. Because remember, they underwrite everything by hand, and it takes that underwriter the same amount of time to underwrite $10,000 as it does $100,000. So there's the same cost no matter how much they're lending. And so if the small business is asking for less than $100,000, well, it turns out it's just not profitable for most banks. So, which is why the approval rates went down so dramatically. So, is all this bad? Depending on your needs, it can be. So, there are some small businesses for whom banks will be a perfectly fine option. However, it's probably going to be slow. We've seen a report, an analysis that suggested that it takes up to 3 to 4 business days, or about 30 hours, to apply before most small business owners can find a bank willing to lend to them. That's a lot of time when you could be doing other things. Also, you might not hear back from the bank for 2 to 3 months, especially if you're applying for an SBA loan, which has more rigorous standards. That is a really, really long time. I personally have spoken to small business owners before who said that the time that they were waiting to hear back from a bank loan application was some of the most stressful of their entire lives, just sitting there wringing their hands, wondering what the bank was going to say. The other problem with it is that they're essentially treating the applicants, the small business owners, like consumers. There's nothing wrong with consumers. All of us are consumers. But The problem with this is the fact that it prevents you from separating your personal and business finances. We speak to a lot of small business owners who incorporated their business, who created, say, an LLC with the intent, or an S Corp, with the intent of separating the personal and business liability. So if something happened in their personal lives, it wouldn't affect their business, and if something happened to their business, it wouldn't affect their personal lives, their personal finances. But when you are, in effect, applying for a bank loan that requires your FICO, you're commingling those assets once again. It also punishes you for bootstrapping with personal loans. So imagine, we speak with a lot of small business owners that in order to get their business started, they use personal loans or credit cards for the initial capital required to get their business off the ground. Well, that can have a negative impact on your personal credit score. So you're getting punished by the bank for essentially putting your heart and soul into your business. Also, too many inquiries or too many hard pulls, which is the industry jargon for the number of applications you make that require your personal credit, too many inquiries can actually hurt your personal credit as well. So if you go and shop around at a bunch of different places, once you get to 5, 6, 7, you actually start seeing a negative effect on your personal credit score. So applying for business funding can actually hurt your personal credit. The other thing is that, as we mentioned earlier, that the banks can't profitably lend, oftentimes, less than $100,000. What we've heard is that most small businesses need less than $50,000. And so this creates a little bit of a disincentive for the banks to work with small businesses, and a disincentive for some small business owners to work with banks, because by taking out more than you need, you can end up paying interest on a loan that was on money that you didn't need right away. So it can be bad, depending on your needs. Going down this path it can be risky. So sensing this risk and sensing this problem, identifying this problem, there was the first wave of fintech companies emerged. Fintech is just a fancy word for financial technology. There's a bunch of entrepreneurs who figured out how to do some of the manual part that the banks take on online. Some of the manual underwriting and the manual application, they can do some of that online. And so the online application, they created an online application, create rules-based decisions to make everything quicker. Rather than a human going through and making all the decisions, you can create some simple rules and make the decisions quicker and assist the human making the decisions. This was also beneficial. Not only was it a little bit faster, but the fintech companies were able to approve small businesses that the banks were not. And so this was a really good this was a really good development for small businesses, because it meant that a lot of them could receive funding who previously were getting rejected. However, it still can take a few days to get a credit decision if you are in a real urgent need for funding. This is still might not be quite fast enough. There can be hidden fees, and most importantly, they're still asking for personal credit and personal guarantees. So they're still treating you like a consumer. So if you want to separate your personal and business finances, this still can be a challenging option for you. So it doesn't need to be like this. As Ty mentioned, there are new alternatives out there. Funbox is among them, that solve many of these old problems. And the most recent development, and many of you have probably heard of it, is the cloud. So more and more of our information is being stored in the cloud, which actually ends up giving you more options and more control than ever before. Why? Because companies can access some of that data if you give them permission, and if you do, you can give them access to information that previously banks didn't have access to. And it allows this new wave of entrepreneurs and new companies to make credit decisions without FICO, because they're using other information outside of your personal credit score. It can also give you more control over what information you share and when, because the newest wave of companies, and Funbox is one of them, allows you to decide which information you do connect to, that you do connect to the funding partner. This new wave also often offers you more transparency over the fees, only charging you when you draw funds, as opposed to, say, subscription fees or inactivity fees or other hidden fees that might happen, that you might experience when just by opening an account. This new wave of companies doesn't charge you anything unless you use the money. And oftentimes they're incentivizing responsible behavior by rewarding paying on time and repaying early. That's one of the things we hear about over and over again from small business owners is they are frustrated with the cycle of debt that they can get into by using traditional financial tools like credit cards, because the debt ends up piling up and grows every month. And guess what? That's the business model with these credit cards. With companies like Fundbox, that's not the business model. We are trying to reward long-term relationships with our customers, healthy, responsible relationships with our customers, by encouraging our customers to pay us on time and to make sure that we pay down the entire amount within the term limits. And that's how we run our business. And that's why we're so thankful to be close partners with Credit Suite in this journey. So I just threw a lot of information at you. So what should you do? What should you do about all of this? I have a few tips for you. One is business merit, deciding on whether or not you want your funding partner to evaluate you based on your business merit or your personal credit. If you have a personal credit that you're willing to share, there's nothing wrong with that. But there are some downsides, there are some implications to that you should be aware of. You now have a choice as to whether or not you share your personal credit. It's an important decision, and like I said, it does have implications. Timing. Consider how quickly you need the funds. Are you trying to make payroll this Friday? Or are you trying to invest in something, a few months down the road? That should impact which direction you go. How much time are you willing to take to fill out the application? Time is money, and if you're willing to spend a lot of time on the application, then that's great. If you have the extra time, that's great. A lot of small business owners I talk to don't, and so they prefer something a little bit faster than the 30 to 40 hours it can take to fill out a bank application. Fees. I think it's really important for small business owners to understand exactly what they're paying for and whether or not there are any hidden costs. Is there a subscription fee? Are there any inactivity fees? Are you penalized for repaying early? These are things that can happen depending on the funding partner, and you should know that going in because they can have real implications for how much you end up paying. Credit limit. Think about how much credit you really need. As you mentioned earlier, the banks can't profitably lend you less than, say, $100,000. Do you really need $100,000? Most small business owners we talk to actually don't want that much money because they want to be, sort of responsible with the credit they do have. And a lot of small business owners that we talk to just need a few $1,000s. So think about what you really need. There's nothing wrong if you really need $100,000. There's nothing wrong with that. But think about whether or not you really, really need it, or if you are just trying to solve a different problem to grow or to solve cash flow gaps, you might not need that much. More sounds good, but you might end up paying for money that you don't need. And then the last thing is controlling your data. Your data is yours. It is an asset, and you should be the one in control. And I think this is also really, really important. And I think a lot of companies out there are starting to recognize this and starting to give you more control. And I think this is an important consideration for small businesses rather than giving up all of their data. Think about what data you want to share in exchange for the chance at receiving credit. Okay, well that's it, Ty. That's what I had prepared.
Well, I really appreciate you going through that, and if you don't mind hanging out with me for a little bit, I've got some different things I want to run through based on what you just talked about. We've created a special link for you as well. If you really want access to probably one of the most easy to qualify for credit lines that's out there, it's at creditsuite.com/Funbox, and that's Credit Suite, which is CREDIT, Credit Suite, SUITE.com/Funbox. So several things that Greg talked about that I think are very important for everybody to know. First of all, inquiries. You talked about how these affect personal credit. And coming from the consumer and credit world, I can tell you that inquiries are a really big deal. Not only are they 10% of your consumer FICO score, but they're also very damaging when it comes to other kind of business financing. So if you're really looking for the most amount of money for your business, we tell people that even one inquiry can cost you $10,000 to $20,000 of funding with some funding sources in the business space. So you really, Greg, brought up a great point, because not only can it really adversely affect consumer credit, but these inquiries can also ruin your ability to access other business credit cards, loans, and credit lines, especially business credit cards and credit lines that are out there. And I also wanted to expand on that I like the fact that you talked about the separation of personal and business credit. SBA, Inc., Entrepreneur, all of these financial authorities talk about exactly the same thing, that if you really want to succeed in business, you have to separate your personal and your commercial credit, just like all the big boys do. So when you talk about no credit check, I think it's brilliant. You mean no business credit check and no personal credit check, is that right?
No personal credit check, no business credit check. Yes, that's right. We are the way that Fundbox works is the small business owner has the choice of connecting either their accounting software or their business bank account, and we review those data sources to get a better sense and to learn more about their business, and we make a credit decision based on that information.
So guys, I can't tell you how groundbreaking this is, because, this is one of the only credit lines I've seen that you can get approved for that requires no credit check. As a matter of fact, it's usually the opposite. Almost all credit lines in the business lending space require good personal credit and tax returns. They require both. This credit line is the only one I've seen that really doesn't require either. Not saying it's not the only one, but it's the only one I've seen that actually you can get approved for with no consumer or business credit check. So if your business credit's not established, you can still get approved. If your consumer credit's really bad, you can still get approved. If you're not supplying tax returns, you can still get approved. But from my experience, if you're willing to supply tax returns, you can get approved for even more money. Rates. This is one of the lowest rate, well, no, this is the lowest rate program I've ever seen in the business funding space. So not only no consumer credit check, but Greg, talk to me a little bit about how your guys' pricing works. What kind of rates people can expect to pay on the credit lines that you guys are offering?
So the way that our pricing works is it's based on the drawn value. So let's say you were to draw $1,000. The fees start at 4.66% of the drawn value. So let's say you draw $1,000, it would be 4.66% of the $1,000 draw paid over 12 weeks. So that's essentially how it works.
And guys, just so you know, that's about, in some cases with SBA, that's 3% cheaper than what we sometimes even see with SBA loans that require tax returns and extensive financials and P&Ls and all these other things. So again, if this makes sense, and we'll talk a little bit more about the qualification, we have a link at creditsuite.com/Funbox that Funbox has helped us set up, where it's a simple process that you can go through, answer a few questions, immediately get approved. And then fund, Greg, what, in about 24 hours after approval, they can usually get access to their credit line. Is that about right?
That's right. So we approve so access happens just within a few hours. It can be as short as 1 hour, maybe up to 3 hours. But just a few hours after you connect your accounting software business bank account, you'll hear back from us with a credit decision. After that, you can draw funds right away. Funds transfer as soon as the next business day.
Perfect. So really fast money, really easy. So what are you guys really looking for? A lot of people are on here saying, well, it's not based on credit. It's not necessarily based on what's on my tax returns. So you guys integrate directly with their accounting software or their bank statements. What is somebody listening and watching here today? What are the things that they should probably meet minimum requirement-wise to have a shot at being able to come in and get approved?
Yeah, so what we look for is healthy businesses. So in the case of your accounting software, that means a lot of receivables, a lot of you're sending out invoices to a variety of different customers, and you're showing healthy revenue. That's what we want to see. We want to lend to healthy businesses. Same thing with your bank account. We want to see some healthy transactions in your bank account, showing that you are you're showing a lot of income in your bank account. What we look for is, this isn't a hard rule, but we look for around $50,000. Again, it's not a hard rule, but we look for around $50,000 or more in your bank account. We look for a minimum of 3 years in business as well, and like I said, healthy transactions with a variety of customers.
Now, do you guys have, and I thought I'd heard that you guys have a program that's even a little bit of a smaller credit lines if they've only been in business a minimum of 1 year.
A minimum of 1 year, yeah, we can do that as well. Like I said, minimum of time in business, minimum amount of data is about 3 months. So if you've been in business and have transactions over the course of, say, 3 months or more, then you could qualify.
So it's what ultimately it sounds like is that you need to have some kind of history they can plug into. If they're going to plug into QuickBooks, for example, if they're going to plug into your bank account, what Funbox is really looking for really comes down to having a positive history, showing that you're earning revenue, showing that you're retaining some of that money in your actual bank account, and possibly having account receivables. If your accounting software like QuickBooks or your bank statements reflect that, then their technology can automatically give you approval just based on that, without the consumer credit check, without the business credit check, without looking aggressively at your bank statements or your tax returns, without requiring any kind of collateral. You're still able to actually come in and get approved. Now, I've also found, Greg, that we had and I have a great example. A buddy of mine came in. He said, look, I need about $30,000. It was a little bit more than that, I think. And he said, I want you to go and get me a revenue lending loan. Now, for those of you that don't know, revenue lending is the most expensive money that's out there. It's typically 25 to 30% interest rates. And I said, look, there's this great program I want to introduce you to. I think we can get a large chunk of your money just by going this route, and these rates are like less than 5%, so it's a fraction of what you'd pay. We went in, we immediately got him approved for $6,000. I mean, within like an hour, he was approved for $6,000. He was told that if he supplied tax returns, he could possibly get more. He supplied tax returns. The next day, his line was approved up to $30,000, and he was ecstatic. Here's a guy that's willing to pay 30% for a loan, and he ends up walking away with a credit line lower than 5% for exactly what he needed. And let me say, he was in a high-risk industry, an industry that he wouldn't have paid 30%. He would have paid 40, 45% just because others don't even like his industry. But because Fundbox technology was able to look at the scenario and say, this makes sense, he generates consistent money, he's got some money in the bank, he has AR with these customers, boom, immediate approval, willing to show tax returns, here's 4 or 5 times the amount we originally gave you an approval for, and now he has one of the lowest interest rate credit lines that I've ever seen out there for $30,000. So do you see a lot of those type of scenarios? Because that was just one example I saw in the last couple of weeks, and we send a lot of customers over to you and see something similar. Is that what you see on the receiving end?
Yeah, so I love those success stories where you've got a small business owner running a really healthy business, and for whatever reason, they just haven't been able to line up the funding, and they come to us, and all of a sudden, they can. We hear from customers like that all the time, and I absolutely love it. This is why I chose to join Funbox, to be perfectly honest with you, is because I want to help small businesses, and funding is one of the biggest challenges that small businesses face. So I love the fact that Funbox is able to work with small businesses that no one else can. And yeah, we do hear about those all the time.
Yeah, and you mentioned also that the majority of people are looking for under 100 grand. Our data supports the same thing. More than 50% of the people that come to us are looking for literally $10,000 or less to get the business off the ground. And what I like to tell everybody is that, look, when I talk about how much money you may need to grow a business, think about what you need the money for, because a lot of stuff like office supplies, you can buy that stuff using a Staples business credit card if you follow our training to get a Staples business credit card. You can get your computers from Dell. You can get your supplies to flip homes from Home Depot. And then you have your credit line available for things that you really need just physical cash for. Maybe it's for payroll. Maybe, as Greg mentioned, maybe it's for one of those reasons you only need it. So if you're being smart with your money and getting like corporate credit cards or business credit cards at stores to pay for most of what you may need, then that lets you use a phenomenal credit line like this to actually be able to come in and buy the things that you just can't buy at stores. And it should give you more than enough money you need to get the business off the ground. And most importantly, navigate through tough times. So, Greg, can you think about an example of one of those situations where somebody needed money quickly, was in a desperate situation, and this was able to help them come in and actually get what they needed fast enough to save and fix the problem they had?
Oh yeah, I mean the most common example we hear about is the one that you just gave, which is payroll. They hire a new employee or a contractor or a customer, more likely a customer, is a little bit slow to pay them. Maybe they're going on 35 days, aging of their invoice, their outstanding invoice with the customer, and they need to make payroll, and they need to make it right now. And so that happens. I mean, that literally happens all the time. So I have tons of examples of those instances. We also have examples of customers looking to grow with Funbox because again, customers are slow to pay them, and they just need a little bit of money to invest in, say, a marketing campaign, or a company. And this is another company that we spoke with that was making they were selling a physical product. They were a manufacturer, and a large retailer came and asked them, or placed a really large order. Now, they had only been selling to mom and pops prior to that. Well, they had to very quickly get funding to build up their inventory and expand their capacity, like immediately, because this large retailer wanted the product quickly. And they had no time to lose. They did not have time to apply for a lengthy bank loan or wait a long time to draw funds. They needed the money right away. And those are the examples that I just love, because we are empowering small businesses with funds so that they can thrive. They can not only can they make payroll, but it allows them to really reach their potential and reach their goals.
Yeah, and I love that example, and it's spot on from what we see in our world. When people urgently need money in our world, it's almost always payroll. It seems like that is where they get to a day or 2 days before, they realize they need the money. They need it fast, and this is one of the fastest ways to be able to get them the money, so I think that makes a ton of sense. I also am a firm believer that success happens when preparation meets opportunity, and what we're talking about here is being prepared for opportunities by having that credit line available. I can tell you that we have a Fundbox credit line. We've already had our limit raised once or twice. We don't use it very much at all. We didn't get it to use it. We got it to make sure that we have it in case we ever need to have it. And because it's the lowest interest rate credit line that we could actually even find anywhere. So we have access to a low interest rate credit line that when we need to take advantage of an opportunity, we can. If there's a quick acquisition that we need to acquire another business even, or we can't make payroll, or these other instances, we can. And I can tell you that's absolutely happened, where something's popped up where it dipped too much into our cash flow to be able to move forward with, where boom, we went in, we used our Fundbox credit line, we came in, we got what we needed, and then we were able to pay it back quickly. And then again, it's still sitting there completely ready for us right now to reuse. That's the benefit of credit lines. You don't pay on what you don't need like you do loans, and they're available to reuse and use again. So you could use them, you pay it down, and you have that availability to reuse it. So there's so many benefits that Greg really touched upon in that you're able to get this kind of financing, have it ready, even if you don't need it now, to be able to have ready when you do need it. Which brings up another point. If somebody comes in, goes to creditsuite.com/Funbox, gets approved, then do they have to pay an immediate fee? Does money immediately get put on the credit line as a fee? What can they expect there?
There are no fees unless you draw the funds. If you don't need the funds, just leave them. You don't need to draw funds. We don't make you draw funds, and we don't charge you unless you draw funds. So that's one of the other things I was going to mention is you were mentioning kind of a rainy day fund. Other places will charge you inactivity fees or, say, a subscription fee, and we don't do that.
And so that's guys, I can't tell you how rare that is to not pay an upfront fee, to not pay an application fee. It really gives you the ability to just get this and have it ready, even if you don't need the money now. Look, everybody listening on the podcast or everybody watching, you're in one of two scenarios. Either one, you're already in a position where your business is up and running, you have the revenue, you already maybe meet the requirements now, which there's not a lot. You just need to make sure that you have some kind of account receivables, or you have, the consistent money going into your bank account, that you're managing your bank account responsibly, or you're not there yet. And if you're not there yet, you still want to write down this link, creditsuite.com/Funbox, because as Greg said, within a few months of having enough data, they can underwrite and approve. So even if you can't qualify right now, this could be on your short-term list of options to help you get the money to really get the business going even within its first year. Or you're on the other side and you already have a business that's going, hey, take a look. Go to creditsuite.com/Funbox. There's absolutely no credit check. So there's nothing. You don't have to supply any income documents to get approved. You're just plugging into your accounting software or your bank statements. So it's simple, fast. You can immediately get an answer, near immediately, within an hour or 2 hours, get an answer. There's no credit check on the personal side, no credit check on the business side. There's no documentation for you. There's no headaches. So it can be easier just to go ahead, take a shot, see if you can get approved now. Many people are surprised at how easy it is to get the approval, or if you're not there yet, well, then make sure you save this link so when you are there, you have an option within your first year to jump in, to get a credit line, and then do what we do, which is continue to supply financials and get more and more money with them as our business grows, our credit line with Funbox grows with us. And what is it? You guys can offer a credit line up to about $100,000. Is that right?
We can, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so credit line up to about $100,000. Approvals probably as low as what, $500, $1,000?
About 1,000, yeah.
About $1,000. So again, most of the people we see are looking for
1,000,
$10,000,
yeah.
$1,000. So most of the people we see are looking for that range, 1,000 to 10,000. But again, we've individually seen approvals 30,000 and well higher. You can even get approved up to $100,000. So a really cool program to have. And again, since there's no inquiries on your personal credit, it still gives you the ability to get this and then it not interfere with your ability to get other loans, other credit lines, other type of financing that's out there. Greg, any final thoughts as we kind of get ready to wrap up?
No, this has been a real pleasure. I'm so excited at the opportunity to get to speak directly through you guys to a bunch of small business owners. Like I said, I have so much passion for this company and for all the hard work that small business owners put into their business every day. So it's really my pleasure to speak with them, and look forward to working with a bunch of you.
Guys, I can tell you that we got on Funbox's radar because when we first discovered this and realized how awesome it was, we went back to every person through years that we had talked to that we had failed to be able to get them loans and credit lines. We keep a list. We tell them we're going to keep a track of any new programs that come up. We went to our list and we started telling them about this program, and one after another we got approval after approval after approval after approval. These were all people that had gotten denied through even the highest risk money sources that we'd found out there, but because of how Funbox's technology works and looks at your ability to repay and common sense lending, we were able to get a lot of people approved that just absolutely were not able to get approved for any other kind of loan or credit line. So again, Greg is a very humble guy. He came in, he provided a lot of education and information of where we've come over the last 5-10 years in business lending, and he made no attempt to even promote their services. The reason this has doubled the time is because I want you to know what they can do, even though they're so humble that they won't really talk about how awesome they are. They deserve to be talked about how awesome they are, because this is an amazing opportunity for you to get money to fund your business when you just simply cannot get money elsewhere or in lieu of other financing, because it's so easy to get, so fast to get, and the rates are so low. So creditsuite.com/Funbox, simple process, takes minutes. Within an hour to 2 hours, you'll get approved. You get denied, no big deal. Then just keep working on growing your business and reapply. There's no credit check, so there's no harm in seeing what you can get now. So creditsuite.com/Funbox. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And Greg, I want to give you a special thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today as well.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you all very much for tuning in. creditsuite.com/Funbox. Save the link and then also visit it now. See what you can get approved for now. It's one of the easiest ways to get financing for your business at the best terms that are out there today. And again, a special thanks to Greg and his team at Funbox, because you guys are doing some amazing things. You should be really proud of what you're accomplishing to help small business owners access the capital they need to grow.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody, very much. Have a great day. Don't forget to visit creditsuite.com/Funbox. Thanks, everybody.